I can still remember why I learnt to play the pipe organ. I was 15 years old. I'd had a year or two teaching myself to play the keyboard in my bedroom, but I couldn't keep up with the other music students in my class. I had to learn a serious instrument and I had to have some proper lessons. Everybody else played the piano, so I chose the organ. It's as simple as that. But what followed was an extraordinary series of events which I could never have imagined, which led me through exams, organ scholarship auditions, Oxford University, and employment as an organist, and finally to the present day, making YouTube videos about village church organs. And that brings us to this village of Nunton, just outside Salisbury. This is one of the first villages where I ever played after university. I found myself in high demand as an organist, £15 per service, perhaps 2 or 3 services on a Sunday at different churches, and it leads me to a question. As someone who's fascinated with the pipe organ, is the organ an intrinsically religious instrument? Or is it merely a musical instrument in its own right? Does it exist outside the church? Well, I don't know if I'll find an answer, but we can certainly begin to ponder. Out of the wind and into the silence of St. Andrew's Church. A very ancient church, rebuilt in 1855. And this is the kind of building I'm very used to entering and spending lots of time in. This is of course a building built for worship, but it would also make a perfect concert venue, wouldn't it? It has a fantastic acoustic, plenty of seating, and a very inspiring atmosphere. And that brings us to the pipe organ. This is a fantastic instrument. It was built by a firm called William Sweetland & Co. of Bath, a very, very good, high-quality organ builder. We'll come on to the sound of it a bit later, but for now, just look at the plaque on the console. This organ was provided by subscription with the assistance of a generous contribution by Andrew Carnegie of Skibo Castle in Scotland. 22nd of November 1909. That is very significant. I'm sure, particularly if you're from the States, you'll know the name Andrew Carnegie. From penniless immigrant to the richest man in the world. Born in a humble Scottish cottage, Andrew Carnegie chased the American dream all the way to Pittsburgh. He revolutionized the steel industry and built an empire that forged modern America's skyscrapers, bridges, and railroads. But his legacy wasn't just about accumulating wealth, it was about giving it away. This is one of nearly 8,000 organs which Carnegie funded as part of his drive to improve society and education. After selling his business for a record $480 million, he gave away almost 90%, funding projects like public libraries, scientific research, and of course, music. He famously quipped that he couldn't vouch for the sermon, but could ensure the quality of the pipe organ. This is a recording I made 2 years ago here at Nunton. It's a piece by J.S. Bach, Ich ruf zu dir, Herr Jesu Christ. I call to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Bach was the finest composer for the church, and his organ music is more devoutly religious than any other. But Carnegie didn't just fund organs in sacred buildings, and many organs were never intended for religious purposes at all. As somebody who grew up with the music of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and yet found himself subsequently playing for hundreds of religious services in churches, I'm always fascinated by the differing uses and functions of pipe organs. Clearly the organ here at Nunton is an instrument for liturgical purpose. It can hardly be separated from the building in which it's located. And the specification of the organ reflects that. It's really only designed for hymns and very simple organ pieces by composers like J.S. Bach. And yet Carnegie's organs weren't always offered for the church. He also funded instruments in concert halls, the most famous being Carnegie Hall in Pittsburgh. If you take yourself back to the year 1900, for example, commercial recording didn't exist, and so the public would never be able to hear great orchestral works like symphonies or pieces like Ride of the Valkyries. They would never hear these pieces played properly. So there was a huge commercial demand for organists who could play orchestral transcriptions. A brilliant organ can overpower an orchestra. It's almost more awe-inspiring. So if one single person can sit down at a grand concert organ and play a full orchestral piece like Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries, they would be in huge demand. And so comes the development of the concert organ, and in its wake, the highest paid organist of his generation. When this photo was taken, nobody knew that its subject would become a superstar. Edwin Lemare was born in 1865 on the Isle of Wight. He grew up an Anglican, and whilst a chorister, he learnt the organ here, Holy Trinity Church in Ventnor. At just 11 years old, he was accepted to study at the Royal Academy of Music, and by his 20th birthday, he'd already performed for hundreds of recitals. This child prodigy would spend his early career in Sheffield and then London, but his church services began to merge into concerts. By 1900, Lemare realised his devotion was not to the Mass, but to the masses, and he left England for good. Shortly after arriving in America, Lemare scored a job worth 5 times his London salary. That was as musical director and organist of the Carnegie Music Hall. And no prizes for guessing who founded that. Part of his job here was to play for huge public recitals to thousands of spectators. The hustle and bustle to attain a place at one of these concerts was very fierce. They were very, very popular. And so we now turn to perhaps the more secular side of organ playing. So it's just right that I should be sat in my music room at this Viscount organ, which is much more similar to the instrument which Lemare would have played. So what are the key differences between a concert organ and a village church organ? Well, first of all, the village organ only had 2 keyboards, so fewer possibilities. Many village church organs just have 1 keyboard. They can really just play hymns and simple voluntaries, but this is much more symphonic. You have a massive choice of sounds. You have tuba sounds, trumpet sounds, you have stringy sounds, and you have more bass potential. The basic principle is that with an instrument like this, you can play symphonic, orchestral music, which you can't do on a village church organ. What I'd like to do is demonstrate Edwin Lemare's most famous composition, because it was requested at almost every single one of his concerts and it's become his greatest legacy. And we'll use this piece to explain why the organ has just as much a secular function as a sacred one. This piece is called the Andantino in D flat, and handily I have the score on my iPad so you can follow this through. This piece is deceptively difficult despite being a simple sounding sentimental organ piece. First of all, it's in D flat, which means there are lots of black notes to worry about, although I don't suppose that fazed Edwin. Secondly, he's quite specific about which organ sounds you should use. And you can see here on the score, he has specified. He would like an oboe in the right hand, so we'll prepare that. What about the left hand? A Dulciana 8-foot. We don't have one of those, so why don't we use the Gedakt, which is a fluty sound. And finally, in the pedals, bourdons 16 and 8. Well, we've got those, 16, 8. And now what I need to do, a feature almost unique to larger organs, is to set these sounds up and store them in the memory banks of the organ so that we can change quickly. So I simply set memory bank 1, and this is quite novel because you can't do this on village church organs. To change the stops, you'd have to turn to your left or your right or get an assistant to help you. So that's page 1 sorted, and page 2 requires slightly different sounds. We'll get onto those in a moment. For now, why don't we listen to this piece? So that's page 1, and I'm sure I've heard that melody somewhere. When we reach page 2, this gets very complicated. Notice that the music is now in 4 staves, and we're using Edwin Lemare's patented technique of thumbing down. He invented this, apparently. What it means is that you play 2 staves of music with 1 single hand. So he asks for the contra fagotto in the right hand on the swell, but also the harmonic flute on the great. And what he wants us to do is play both keyboards with the same hand. Edwin Lemare apparently had very long fingers, so he could navigate that passage quite easily. What's interesting about that is that it achieves maximum contrast, doesn't it? Because you've got 2 different sounds with 1 hand alone. And then in the left hand you've got a completely different sound, and finally the pedals play an independent sound of their own. So you have 4 different sounds played by 1 single person. It's very orchestral, it's symphonic. That's the essence of his playing style. Let's try this out. That's extremely difficult. It's a deceptively tricky piece. I'm sure some of you recognise the melody, and rightly so, because it gained a whole new life, not a religious one, and not one of which Edwin initially approved. For nearly 30 years, Andantino belonged strictly to the classical world. But in 1921, it caught the ear of pop songwriter Charles Daniels, aka Neil Moray. Without Lemare's knowledge, he added a lush, romantic lyric, rechristening the piece Moonlight and Roses. Lemare was initially furious, and he threatened legal action. But a settlement was agreed, and eventually he received his share. It's a fabulous transformation, and I can't resist having a go myself. Sorry, Edwin. Moonlight and Roses, which reminds us of another secular function of the pipe organ as entertainment, the mighty Wurlitzer. Perhaps the most famous recording of Moonlight and Roses was made by Jim Reeves in 1964. So it's perhaps the only organ piece to have reached #1 in the US country charts. It's also incredibly popular at funerals. And I remember my grandmother saying that all of Jim Reeves' recordings gained a whole new poignancy because he died shortly afterwards in a plane crash. Moonlight and Roses bring wonderful memories of you. My heart reposes in beautiful thoughts so true. June light discloses love's golden dreams sparkling anew. Moonlight and roses bring memories of you. Perhaps the popularity of that song at funerals is a blend of the popular and the divine, and so perhaps Lemare would be pleased. If you're enjoying today's film, then please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done already. It doesn't cost anything, you just click that subscribe button and you'll be notified about my next video. If you're really enjoying the music, then I'd be really grateful for your financial support if you'd like to. You can make a contribution by clicking on the link underneath this video to help support me and my work visiting these country churches and all of the research that's involved in producing these films. Thank you. I'd like to leave you with a final blend of the sacred and the secular in a performance with my brother Billy. But first, a poem. I chanced within St. Margaret's yesternight, a stranger, saddened by the ills of life, a fugitive from self and inward strife, but proving even though there's a futile flight, when lo, the holy house grew great with song, and angel voices broke upon my ear, and I forgot that I was lone and drear, and soared triumphant over every wrong. And as I listened to the magic strain that filled and thrilled me with reviving hope, what late seemed weakness with expanding hope was now a power that made all barriers vain. Thus recreated in impulsive prayer, I thanked the Eternal for thy art, Lemare. Cheerio.